Welcome to Manager Tools. The Manager Tools Data, One-on-Ones, Part 4. This cast answers these questions. What data do you have to support the use of one-on-ones? What do tests show of one-on-ones? What do the data say about the frequency of one-on-ones? Well, if you want answers to these questions and more, keep listening. Here we go.
Hey Canada! From east to west, we're bringing our events to you. If you've been looking for an opportunity to attend a Manager Tools event without having to trek south, now's the perfect time. We'll be starting on the East Coast with our Effective Manager and Effective Communicator conferences in Toronto, March 19th and 20th. Then we'll head west for our Vancouver Effective Manager and Effective Communicator conferences on April the 2nd and 3rd. Register today at manager-tools.com/training, and we'll see you there.
It's really easy to understand why monthly O3s don't work very well, just experientially. I know we're talking more about data, and this is not data, but everybody's aware of the term dog and pony show, right?
Yeah.
People hate dog and pony shows. And in my experience, monthly O3s take on the flavor of a dog and pony show, which is every month I have an opportunity to prove to my boss how well I'm doing, how my data stacks up, etc. And nobody I know likes preparing for those. And it's certainly not about trust and relationships. It doesn't feel like that.
Yeah. I actually think another part of it that makes a difference that we insist on when we're working with clients and training managers individually, in our studies and in our guidance today, managers are required to brief their directs on the purpose of one-on-ones. And that's where you end up coming to the dog and pony show, right? Is because we tell them, you have to tell them the reason I'm doing this is I want to build a trusting relationship with you through regular communication. And the reason I'm doing that is because I want to produce better results.
No. You wouldn't want to do that. You wouldn't want to tell them up front because, you could start off this trying to build a relationship by not being forthright with why you're doing it. I mean, that would work, right?
Yeah. Managers go, well, why? That'll seem cheesy. No, actually, the opposite will seem cheesy. You starting to meet with them weekly without telling them what's going on? Trust me, ask yourself, if your boss suddenly starts behaving differently to you, aren't your antennae going to go up? Aren't you going to wonder what the heck's going on? What if he starts wanting to meet with you weekly? You don't know anything about our program. You don't know anything about one-on-ones. And then you say to him, I'm just wondering, why are we doing this? Sort of an additional level of oversight. What's going on here? Oh, no, I just want to talk to you more. You'd leave that one-on-one with more questions than you went in there with. We have a rule. It's an ironclad rule. Never introduce a change to how you're going to manage your people without first taking the time to introduce that change to them before you engage in it.
Yeah. By the way, folks, just dawned on me, I probably should say this. Like, we're talking about data and testing and all this. Don't do your own experiment. Say you have 5 directs or 6, let's make it easy, 6 directs. Don't do one-on-ones with 3 of them. And don't do one-on-ones with the other 3 as a control group. You're not going to like the results from that. Dude, if we don't say it, somebody will.
Yeah, can I do my own study? Yeah, no, don't do that. But here's the thing. If you brief your directs before you start doing one-on-ones, that you are trying to build a trusting relationship, that they're going to have a chance to talk to you every week about things that are important to them, and you don't really need that venue because you already have that time, any time you want to, frankly. If you tell them that and then say, and so I'd like to sit down and talk to you every month, people won't believe you. Okay. They won't believe a monthly meeting will do much of anything to improve their relationship with you, their communication with you, or their trust of you. And as Mike said, dog and pony show, we have lots of anecdotal evidence from forums that people said, I hate this. Tell my boss to stop doing monthly one-on-ones. And that gives you some sense of the importance of periodicity in things that we do, that weekly one-on-ones are loved. Directs actually say, I actually just wrote about this in Things I Think that goes out to all of our licensees. I said, dudes, here's an email from a subordinate to a boss because the subordinate was going to move to a different boss. And I think he said something like, hey, do you think the organization can help your peer managers import and start doing these manager tools behaviors? Like, yeah, even directs like one-on-ones. It may take them a couple of weeks to get used to it. Some of them, not all of them. But once they get on board, they'll start liking them. So we alluded to this, but let me make it perfectly clear. Based on the data we've analyzed from monthly one-on-ones, we stopped including them in our studies after 4 attempts. Guys, there's basically an ethical problem in asking professional participants to engage in behaviors that we knew. I mean, we can't predict it completely all the time, but we had significant enough data. We were crowing about the weeklies beating up on the monthlies. Well, if we're going to do that, we have to crow about the weeklies crowing about the weekly one-on-ones beating up on a control group. Gosh, if we know that the monthlies always destroy results and retention, right? We can't advocate that, so we didn't. We have repeated this study, weekly, biweekly, monthly control group, 3 other times. They all produce similar results and retention rankings, and weekly one-on-ones always being most effective. And further studies included one-on-ones comparing weeklies in different settings, different industries, different size companies, and so on.
So it will actually work on a production floor, right? Just saying.
Yeah, actually, the phrase it will actually work on blank is infinity. The blank is infinity. When people say, oh, I'm not sure this will work on a small company. I mean, and then I say, you mean like my company with 10 people? Yeah, like that. Or a 3-person company? Yeah, that's small. Yeah, we have 3. We've done studies where we looked at the effects of rank on one-on-ones. People say, oh, well, this is not for executives, because heaven forbid executives get their pretty little hands dirty with the managerial behavior, to say nothing of the fact that they're managers because they have direct reports. But, God, it'd be like calling an executive a blue-collar worker, heaven forbid. We looked at rank. Do higher level managers get more or less improvement than lower level managers? And the answer, or our conclusion, our data suggests that improvement in results and retention are roughly the same for frontline managers all the way up to senior directors, and in some cases, even higher. Okay? All of the results and retention improvement differences at 16 different companies of different sizes, 9 different industries, statistically insignificant. Now, we were able to measure a statistically noticeable and repeated difference, though it wasn't significant, in results and retention improvement. We still get notable improvement when we get into executive ranks. Some of that is, believe it or not, difficultness to quantify what the results and retention should be. And you have to ask yourself about results from retention of the executive's directs or all of her organization. There are reasonable differences among study team members regarding who, in fact, is an executive. I've talked about this before on shows where we touched on executive and managerial behaviors and how they're different. Do we measure someone from how close they are to the top of the firm or how far they are from the bottom of the firm? Do we go with the more business operational definition of an executive, which is not relative to rank, but his ability or her ability to influence the entire organization? Or do we measure it based on the ecosystem, which is to say, if in fact you play a greater than 50% portion of your time responsible for determining what is happening outside of the organization, as opposed to working on internal matters, then that tends to make you more of an executive. Also, how does top versus bottom thing analysis translate into a company with only 50 employees? Somebody could be 2 levels down from the top and also only 1 level from the bottom. Is that person an executive? I don't know. Generally, though, executives get about 10 to 15% less improvement in results and retention than lower level managers do. Now, that, to be clear, guys, that's 10 to 15% of a percentage. So if a bunch, as an example, if a bunch of first, second, and third line managers are getting roughly 8% improvement, an executive would get roughly 7%. Still significant, still worth doing, just less. That's what our data say. Now, over the years, we've had lots of discussions about what causes that difference. We think that it might be that managerial skills have less impact on the results and retention of executives because of the different type of work that executives do. And their directs, having gotten to working for a fairly more senior person, therefore probably managers themselves, they don't need to be managed quite as much by their boss. But again, the data don't say that. The data are just numbers, and we're left to draw some conclusion. In my estimation, the difference between 7 and 8% is trivial when you add in the value of setting an example. Okay. I cannot tell you how many times I've been called by somebody that says, I need you to fix my executive team. We'll have an offsite and you can spend 2 days with them. And he said, and the CEO says, but I won't be there.
Right. Yeah. Go fix them.
Dude, have an IQ test, please. Now, our data show, when you analyze it in a meta study, that more technical industries and roles get a slightly bigger improvement than less technical companies. Now, that's based on a relatively unscientific classification of the relative technicalness of various industries. It's probably not significant, although anecdotally, it absolutely vibrates with me. And it does conform to our general belief. Beliefs aren't really easily measured and parsed, but the belief that technical industries tend to recruit more task-focused employees. To me, having worked in it for the last 25 plus years, the classic example of this is the software development industry, where it would not be unusual to have 70% of employees lean to the left on the DISC scale as a high D or a high C. What this potentially suggests is the less people-centered organizations get more benefit from engaging in one-on-ones. But the difference wasn't large, and all industries across the board, all companies, all sizes got notable improvements. Now, I mentioned size. Going back to company size, we've done 3 studies comparing the effect of one-on-ones, weekly one-on-ones, in small, medium, and large organizations. For the billionth time, but maybe for the first time categorically on a podcast, nearly 14 years into our work, we have never been able to find any significant difference in results and retention improvements based on organization size. Now, mind you, we did both a number of years ago. We attempted a study to find it, and then we attempted a study that the study's parameters and metrics were not addressed to that, but we ended up analyzing for that. And one of the reasons we did that, we happened to be, Horstman Company was in its heyday at the time, and I could pretty much go in and say, this is what I'm going to do. And clients were saying yes, is we knew that if we started looking for something, we had to guard against our own biases. It was amazing. Even statisticians who, they don't have opinions about anything, right? They just say, well, let's look at the data. But we started getting biased, expecting to see things. And if you're expecting to see something, it's really hard to see the opposite. You make things look right. So we actually looked for a chance to prove that bigger or smaller was better. We never could. And then we analyzed data where we were not looking at company size, but we did a meta-analysis of the data and discovered company size had no difference. And we have measured statistically significant similar improvements in companies of less than 50 people and actually less than 20 as well, and in companies greater than 100,000 employees. Now, you might argue that, Mark, there's a big difference between 100,000 employees and 400,000 employees. Yeah, you may be right. And if you're asking me, do we have any data on companies bigger than 500,000 employees? The answer is no. Similar results, based on the themes you're hearing now, folks, were achieved in governmental organizations. Results-wise, we don't have data on retention in governmental organizations. They don't really like that measure. Some of that's union issues here in the States, and also because of the way governmental pay and pension programs are set up. and their data set and how they would measure it anywhere different. And you don't want to have to build an infrastructure in a study to measure something differently than the organization normally measures it. The largest study we ran for over 13 months was for 3 different federal departments. Results differ between control groups, those not doing one-on-ones, and test groups. Results improved in a range from 8% to 21%. Now, I will tell you, I've said before, it has a small relationship to profit, but governmental organizations and academic organizations typically are much less well managed. But whether you measure outcome or whether you measure employee satisfaction or engagement or anything else, and it's really hard in some cases. Actually, some of the hardest studies we did were in academia because the academicians felt that they had a smarter way to measure organizations, even if they weren't organizational scientists, which always amused me to some degree. Much to my chagrin when I shared my amusement with the dean, and he said, well, I'm smarter than you. And he was right. He was smarter than me, just not about that. But it didn't matter because he had more power than me, and that got quashed really fast. Anyway, in some cases, results were actually easier to measure in governmental roles because the work was so narrowly constructed and been done the same way for so long, and there were long historical records that existed. So it was like, just compare this quarter to last quarter with the number they calculate, even if they're not allowed to be evaluated based on the number that they're required to calculate. I thought that was funny. We actually measured results based on specific job functions, which in many cases we had to create a results measurement for managers because their directs didn't have job function specificity and so on. I think the appropriate way to describe what I'm about to say is that it is an anecdotal bit of evidence. I want to elevate it on a platform, but one group of managers from the same department in a governmental organization, all in the test group, improved their results by over 50% with no change allowed other than weekly one-on-ones. Now, that was included in a bunch of other managers, and we got notable improvement.
One data point, but pretty significant. 50%. That's pretty significant.
I'll tell you
what, tell me I can get 50% improvement over my results, and all I have to do is meet with each of my directs 30 minutes every week. I'll do that.
It's like the part in The Italian Job, the movie, where the newest one, where they asked the guy, the really smart guy, the Napster guy, I've got how many bricks, how much is it worth? And they're like 7 people. He says, oh, that's $2.7 million. And there's a moment of silence. And they go, oh, no, wait, sorry. I mean, $27 million. And same thing here. You see 50% and you say, oh, that's an error. It's 5%. So you go back and you check and it's 50% again. And you go, it's 5%. And then finally you have somebody else check your work. You don't tell them what they're checking. They say, oh, it's 49.2% or 51.3%. Oh, it's actually 50%. So yeah. If you're wondering about international use and effectiveness, I hear this all the time. This is funny. It's funny now. Years ago, I thought I had enough data. I had to educate people. And I realized there are some people that just don't want to be educated. It's too much of their persona that Brazilians are different than Americans, different than Japanese, different than Kazakhstanis, different than the French, different than Algerians. It's like, anyway, internationally, we see largely similar results in company size, managers, executives, everything. If I gave you 2 piles of data and asked you to tell me which one was international and which one was domestic, you couldn't tell. Results look similar on every continent where we've ever measured managers, except, as I've said before, Antarctica. We did one study that was a broad study of over 700 managers for a 9-month period. 5 multi-divisional companies in this study, operations worldwide. And in all cases, we provided training for the managers. We followed their performance around results, but not retention. Retention is a tripwire or a third rail in some cases. In several countries, there was no way to measure the retention, and certain countries discourage it, period. Results improved between 10 and 20%. I mean, you could build a behemoth out of that. I'm just saying. I actually remember talking to an executive, said, "Oh, you're the guy that helped that other group with the one-on-ones." He says, "Yeah." I said, "Yeah." And I just assumed that this was going to be a cakewalk to get his division to engage us to teach them and so on. And he said, "Yeah, I don't do one-on-ones." I said, what's funny about that is we were engaged to do two things, to measure the results improvement and also to teach one-on-ones to get the results improvement. It's really not about one-on-ones, it's about results." He says, "Yeah, I couldn't get my guys to do one-on-ones and I don't like them." And, I said, "So you're willing to rule out something that an organization similar to you did with people in it that you could talk to if you wanted to, with a notable improvement of results?" He says, "Look, Mark, I'm not willing to go about getting results any way I want. The ends never justify the means." I just thought, some people, that's where they are and they're happy there and they're not going to stay. So whether we sorted the data by country or industry or company, we noted similar improvements results in all cases. Control groups underperformed versus test groups conducting weekly one-on-ones, similar to other studies' results data, no matter where, no matter how high, except as I mentioned, the exception regarding executives. It doesn't matter the pay level. It doesn't matter whether we're talking blue collar, white collar, pink collar, gray collar, doesn't matter. All the same. Now, if you want to extend it a little bit further, if you're wondering what one-on-ones did for morale or engagement or financial results, except when those financial results were actually codified in managerial results, we can't tell you those things. We never measured for those things. Maybe now, today, 15 years after starting this journey with Mike, was it 15 years, Mike? It's 14 years now.
14
January,
years
right?
now. Coming soon.
Well, no, but we had been doing manager tools and leader tools like stuff before that, right? Maybe I wish I had studies about morale and engagement. Just so you know, engagement didn't exist 20 years ago. Morale existed as a word in the dictionary. Nobody was really measuring it. But I don't think I could convince anybody to study those things. And frankly, knowing what I know now, even though I might wish it just to be able to say, hey, since everybody's really excited about engagement, not that it's that important, I have data which shows something that will absolutely juice your engagement. If that's a good thing, great. And oh, by the way, you might be happy with the improvement of results and retention too, since one leads to profit and the other one leads to cost reduction.
If you just want the engagement and not the business results improvements, I don't know if I can help you.
No, yeah, if you only want that, then don't do that. But don't do one-on-ones because you're going to get both. And, Anyway. But the problem with that is that studies like this, you can't lard them up and try to measure everything. It's more useful to make them pretty narrow and focus. So no, we didn't measure those things. I'm willing to tell you that I'm not a statistician, so I know what I know, and more importantly, I believe what I believe, and you'll get those things. But do I have data on it? No. As I mentioned at the start of my book, The Effective Manager, which has done very well at Amazon, so much so that now The Effective Hiring Manager will come out in 2019, detailing all of our guidance and more about how to hire people. But at the start of my book, The Effective Manager, I say, this is what I tell my friends. I love having this data, and there's a bunch more to come over the course of this year. And folks, I don't tell my friends to do one-on-ones because of the data, because my friends and I have trusting relationships. And I tell them to do one-on-ones because they're smart enough to know that what they want is results from retention. And I've seen it happen so many times, I don't need to go back to the data. And I've had so many people say to me, yeah, I didn't believe it. And it worked. I mean, I'm astounded. That's where the phrase came up, where the phrase originated. Mark, you're not going to believe it. I did what you suggested and it worked. And my answer is, why wouldn't I believe it? I wouldn't have never recommended it to you unless I believed that it would work. And my belief is much more fully ingrained now than just the data would suggest. Let me mention one other thing. Out of over 350 cohorts of managers in various test groups over all these years, only 13 organizations achieve less than 2% improvement. less than 200 managers out of the hundreds of thousands logged a reduction in results and retention. That's just astounding to me. And to me, that was one of those things that proved to me that we didn't know what we were doing. Full disclosure, guys, I'm not trying to make you feel bad. Neither did Mike or I know what we were doing. That's the whole point of Manager Tools. We don't want you to go through what we went through, unlearning a bunch of dumb stuff you tried because no executive said, I didn't really know what I was doing either, but I got lucky with a couple of promotions and now I'm in a role I can do pretty well. We want you to know what you need to know and be able to do what you need to do to be effective. So that's it at a high level, Mike. We've got many more shows to come out about the data. It'll probably take over a year to get it all out. Not every week. I don't want to bore people with it over the next 8 to 10 weeks or 20 weeks, but that's it at a high level. Let me just summarize, guys. If you're doing one-on-ones now, but you need help persuading others who'd like a rational approach, now you've got the data. Have them listen to this cast. If you're the manager needing data to start your change effort with your directs, use this data. If you're trying to convince your boss, use this data. If you make the effort and the change data, the data that we've shared helps you implement it and you get the results and retention improvements that you want, we look forward to hearing from you. And don't feel required to confine yourself to just the data. Let us know how you feel, because when you do something you feel good about and how you have data to match, and then you get what you're expecting, that's a pretty good experience in the kind of tumultuous world we live in.
Not a bad thing, having more trusting relationship with your directs and getting better results and better retention all at the same time. That's the trifecta, my friend.
Yeah, we don't have data on how you feel, but we've felt similarly, and it's a really good feeling.
All right. Thank you, my friend.
You bet, partner.
See you later. Thanks, everyone. That's it. We'll see you next week. Have a great one. So long.